Story 13. The Camera Girl. Posted on March 5, 2022. The following is a true story experienced by the author. Recap. On the previous story, No Longer Together, we talked about how Fat Tinkerbell was removed from working with RoboCop suddenly without any notice. That Fat Tinkerbell had no idea who said what, or how it was possible for Harry Potter to just move her days around. When literally Fat Tinkerbell was hired to be off on the 2 specific days that the king told her. She thought it was unfair. But then again, she had no clue as to why they've moved her. She had realized that it was RoboCop who had requested that she be taken off his days, and she was devastated. She didn't know how to handle it or how to react to that. She started trying to remember what she did wrong, but she had no idea as to what the reason for RoboCop's actions was. She wanted to badly ask or question, but that would only show her interest and her crush. But let's begin this story. The Camera Girl. As the days move along, and Fat Tinkerbell was now working under Weed Guy as her only manager. She had accepted the fact that RoboCop would no longer ever again be her manager. She was badly missing how his deep voice would sound in the walkie-talkie. She was missing the fact that she'd be forced to answer to his radio calls and radio checks. She was missing the following and stalking and everything about RoboCop. Like mentioned in previous stories, RoboCop wasn't only the tough, bad boy, badass that all the pretty young things chased after. He was also this exciting character full of life, full of action. Anyone threatened him, he'd physically or verbally fight them. Even if he lost the fight. Some shopper slipped and fell in his maze. He'd exaggeratedly call the police, the ambulance, the FBI, and the CIA. Even though RoboCop would most of the time look like he's angry or pissed off, he still would have hella fun at work all by himself. And if that meant riding around on a scooter all over the maze, or stalking and following his employees all over the maze, or making a huge deal over anything that happened at the maze, well, he was gonna do it. He was also good at standing up to the costumers or robbers all by himself. He'd become loud or aggressive on his own. Nobody would challenge someone like RoboCop. Moving on. Fat Tinkerbell had assumed that RoboCop had removed her from his shift because he disliked her or hated her for no reason, or because she was obese and overweight. She also kind of believed that maybe it was because she had been acting like she hated RoboCop, giving him hate stares and dirty looks, and avoiding him at every turn and running out of the office when he's there, not ever saying a word to him. Fat Tinkerbell realized how rude and disrespectful her behavior was towards him. However, she said to herself, "Let's remember that RoboCop had snitched on you the moment you were new here. Let's remember the lost phone prank." So then Fat Tinkerbell just thought, yes, that's the reason I continued with the avoidant behavior. So until he apologizes for those 2 things, I'm gonna be this one employee that hates him. Also, his male brooding, little look made everyone else feel angry as well, alongside his deep, serious, boring tone of voice. Fat Tinkerbell was giving out all these reasons as to explain her behavior towards RoboCop. She wasn't about to be one of those girls that drool over him and make a fool of themselves. She wasn't about to be like Green-Eyed Snake or any of the Barbies inside the help center, who probably also might have effed him. Most of the girls RoboCop had effed were bombshells. Fat Tinkerbell didn't look like that, but she wasn't about to do immorality, like them, to feel special or to have some sort of validation. Well, let's be real, deep down she wanted to, but her weight and her looks were inhibiting her. Her obesity was getting in the way of her goals. Like explained in the previous story, Fat Tinkerbell had decided that now that she doesn't feel as nervous every single moment she enters the office because Weed Guy is the leader. Well, now she can focus on her weight loss and focus on becoming better than those losers. Better than Green-Eyed Snakes, better than RoboCops even. She was willing to climb mountains to get to that point, to reach that goal. And the moment she looked like a 10 out of 10 model, she'd leave. She'd either sweep the RoboCop of his feet and keep him all to herself, or she'd leave him hanging the moment he'd ask her out. Or she'd lose her virginity to him and then leave him hanging. That would be the moment she'd quit and get to a different job. Or enter the military. It was a long way to go. But Fat Tinkerbell was willing to put in the time and effort and patience. Fat Tinkerbell truly was down for the ride. As the weeks move along, Fat Tinkerbell had begun a diet of her own. A made-up diet that she thought would work. This one diet she was gonna dare to follow it, with food like McDonald's. So the diet plan was called 1 meal a day. So basically Fat Tinkerbell would go to McDonald's to buy 1 chicken sandwich and eat half of it at work. and the other half at home. She would show this diet off to her maze little shop buddies. But they'd always make fun of her, saying that eating McDonald's won't work, and that she's crazy for thinking that. But nonetheless, she followed it for 30 days only. The goal was 30 days. No turning back, no failing. She had completed the 30 days soon enough, and with all the walking she had to do at work. At the end of the 30 days, she had lost almost 20 pounds altogether. Fat Tinkerbell was so shocked. She couldn't believe it. She had been using RoboCop and Green-Eyed Snake as fuel for her goals, and it was working. Never before in her life had she lost any weight, or even dared to attempt to lose any weight. Like previously mentioned, Fat Tinkerbell was a very overweight and unamused girl. You know the saying, you look like who you hang with? Or the saying, you are who you hang with. Well, it was true. It was a reality more than ever to Fat Tinkerbell now. Truly everyone at her household was overweight. Her dad was overweight and an alcoholic. No wonder, Fat Tinkerbell thought. After the 30 days, Fat Tinkerbell couldn't continue to stick to the famous McDonald's chicken sandwich for every single day. Water was still her only liquid, and the walking more than 10,000 steps at work daily was a done deal. That's part of her job. But soon she found a new sandwich for a new 30 days. Thankfully, the maze had hella restaurants, a food hall as well, and one of those restaurants was Subway. So Fat Tinkerbell made use of that Subway restaurant and chose the tuna sandwich with lettuce and other veggies. A much healthier choice for the next 30 days. As the days passed, and Fat Tinkerbell's diet became ever so difficult, something new had happened. In the maze, they were all reaching the month of July 2019 when Harry Potter chose to quit. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the famous #1 asshole of the maze, the same one from the very first story. The one that had wrote her up, that Harry Potter nerd. The same one that threatened to fire her within 2 weeks from her being new, and in front of RoboCop. He quit. It was said that Harry Potter couldn't handle the heat and the moisture from the outdoors. That he was too weak to take it. Fat Tinkerbell could see that and understand that, as she had multiple times complained of the temperature and heat and costumers. But she was willing to take it. But thank God. Thank the Lord. That psychopath Harry Potter had quit. Good riddance. That one was a complete tyrant. A narcissist of the worst kind. A sociopath. The only reason RoboCop and Weed Guy would be on his side is because he's basically a prince and they need to kiss his ass. That tyrant was writing up old ladies like Mrs. Shorthair. He was writing up so many others among Fat Tinkerbell. Fat Tinkerbell wasn't the only victim. Bear Boy said that Harry Potter was such a tyrant and such a bully that he'd write him up for nothing. He'd tell the story of how the king would come across his write-ups and that the king himself would rip his write-ups. Nerd tyrant from hell. Now at that point in the soldiers of the maze, they have lost a captain and a prince. Harry Potter was the second in command under the king. A tyrant from hell. But the #2 nonetheless. As I've said previously, we have #1, the king. #2, the Harry Potter. #3, the captain. Then we have the managers. #4, the Weed Guy. #5, the Night Witch. #6, the boss battle. #7, the RoboCop. Then we have the employees. #8, Angel Guy. #9, China Boy. #10, Diet Coke. #11, Bear Boy. #12, Fat Tinker, and many other random employees that are irrelevant and have nothing to do with our stories. So yes, basically the two main people under the king are now missing. The Weed Guy used to be the captain, but we all know the story of how the king no longer wanted him to be the captain and had tricked him into a lower rank next to RoboCop. The Angel Guy somehow gave up his position of manager and gave it to Weed Guy. Now Angel Guy is just another employee like Fat Tinkerbell and Diet Coke. Because from the first stories, Angel Guy was Fat Tinkerbell's main manager. The Weed Guy was the captain and Harry Potter's bestie more than RoboCop. This is why she'd always see Harry Potter and Weed Guy walking together almost every single day. I hope I'm making sense with all of this. Moving on. As the days pass and weeks and Fat Tinkerbell makes more progress with her new diet. There was talk of the king trying to obtain a brand new captain and a brand new #2 prince. Diet Coke was ever more nosy with Weed Guy and RoboCop and now even Angel Guy. It was almost as if she had a thing for Latin men. The Angel Guy wasn't even in shape. But there she was. Diet Coke sucking all those 3 dicks. Diet Coke, by the way, if not mentioned previously. She was an Afro-American woman of color in her 30s. She was in great shape. Like mentioned in previous stories, Diet Coke wasn't Fat Tinkerbell's friend anymore. At first it seemed as though she wanted to, but that wasn't the case at all. Diet Coke also seemed to be more rebellious and full of habits than Fat Tinkerbell. Fat Tinkerbell wasn't into the whole clubbing thing, or smoking cigarettes thing, or smoking weed thing, or anything like that at all. Like mentioned previously, Fat Tinkerbell was a very boring, unamused person. But that wasn't gonna push her to go clubbing and partying, and smoking and inhaling anything. Her parents taught her to be better than that. Even though she has been dealing with a food addiction most of her life. Well, Diet Coke was one of those people. It was also said that she was the type of person that sells you know what. On the streets. Not any longer. But back in the day. It was clear to Fat Tinkerbell that a lot of the people in the workplace, especially at that workplace where she was at, had cigarette addictions and a lot of them had criminal records. It was almost like prison. What most of those managers and employees and even May's employees, what they call fun is clubbing and getting drunk, getting high and getting laid. A sick world unknown to innocent poor Fat Tinkerbell. Fat Tinkerbell was the homely girl. Her father threatened to beat their ass if they dare obtain a boyfriend while underage. Very strict, very Christian family household. Fat Tinkerbell knows nothing of sex, nothing of clubs and parties, nothing about alcohol and being drunk and being high. Back at her home country, fun was to go out mountain climbing and go on vacations every other day. Fun was to visit the jungle and the beach. Catching animals and setting them free. Making bonfires out of nothing. There was a traditional holiday every other week. Not drugs and sex, and weed and ghetto music and alcohol. None of that. That type of behavior wasn't even seen on the adults back in her homeland, with her family members or parents. None of that. Moving on. Yes, it seemed Fat Tinkerbell kind of had to accept these people for who they were. She was civil with Diet Coke and many others like her. The system was corrupt and all these people can do what they wish, but Fat Tinkerbell wasn't about to engage in any of that. When Diet Coke and Angel Guy explained how fun it was to go clubbing and cheating on their partners, Fat Tinkerbell just pretended it was okay and laughed alongside them. I guess now we can say that Angel Guy isn't that much of an angel. Anyway, Fat Tinkerbell was more focused on her weight loss than ever. Soon she started writing logs on her phone to keep motivated and to keep her on her A game. To keep her accountable. First log reads, and I quote, "So my diet ended. I went on a little 3-day vacation with my sister to get away from our annoying parents. I lost about 20 pounds with the diet. I also gained back 3 to 4 pounds with the vacation. I might be weighing 179 to 180 pounds regardless. I basically lost about 15 pounds with the diet and the vacation. I don't regret the vacation or the diet though. I learned a lot from both. Today is my first day of fasting. August 2019. Second log reads, and I quote, "Let's see what weight I can get to. I have set 10 days of fasting, but I might add some extra days for better results and maybe for Halloween." September 2019. Fat Tinkerbell still had to see RoboCop every afternoon that she came into work. Not because she worked with him again, but because he was leaving to go home for the day. Like I said, he does the morning shift. RoboCop sometimes stared at her like he's in love with her. And other times he'd leave the office immediately without a second thought. Fat Tinkerbell still was too embarrassed and ashamed and shy to be in his masculine presence. It felt almost like she was walking to clock into work naked. Because RoboCop was in there. When RoboCop wasn't in there, it was boring to come into work and clock in and get to work. There was no thrill, there was no fear, there was no excitement. Nothing. Seeing RoboCop was like seeing a celebrity. There's no other feeling like it. It's like seeing a superhero in person. Face to face. One of the days that Fat Tinkerbell went in there to clock in on a day that RoboCop worked. Well, RoboCop and Weed Guy stared at her all weird while there were hundreds of soldiers huddled together inside the tiny office. She tried not to mind it at all. Immediately, RoboCop tells Fat Tinkerbell if she wanted a donut that someone had brought for all of them. Fat Tinkerbell, playing the denying game and being on a weight loss journey, she very well denied. She had to be consistent and strict with her journey. Obviously, she was still overweight and still pretty much obese looking. One can't look like a Barbie the following day of a completed workout. But RoboCop, as he offered some donuts to Fat Tinkerbell, it appeared as though he was about to laugh. It was one of those evil looks he had when he heard what Fat Tinkerbell did to his ex-green-eyed snake. Clearly, he was either trying to tease or bully Fat Tinkerbell in that exact moment. Later on, Fat Tinkerbell found out that it wasn't RoboCop who had purchased those donuts, it was actually Weed Guy who had bought it for everyone. Fat Tinkerbell tried not to mind any teasing or jokes from RoboCop. She was still on track, trying to complete an almost impossible goal. From that one moment, Fat Tinkerbell kind of realized how much RoboCop really disliked her. But like said, Fat Tinkerbell was not about to mind any incoming tricks or insults from RoboCop. First the removing her from the schedule, and then mocking her with the donuts. Well, moving on with the actual story. One night, while working on a regular boring day with Weed Guy and Diet Coke, there had been a situation where some pirates had been teasing and threatening Weed Guy. Weed Guy was more friendly towards Fat Tinkerbell around that time. He saw her as a good friend more and more. Slowly but surely. That day, he had called his bestie Diet Coke, Fat Tinkerbell, and another random employee to help him get rid of the pirates and remove them from the premises. As Fat Tinkerbell met up with Weed Guy and Diet Coke by one of the exits in the maze, she realized who the pirates were and how loud and obnoxious they were behaving. They were cussing off both Diet Coke and the Weed Guy. Both Weed Guy and Diet Coke appeared to be completely pissed off and angered. Fat Tinkerbell couldn't help but find their expressions funny. Regardless, she did help remove the pirates from the property. As the group of little soldiers walked together to make sure those pirates left for sure, there was a back and forth cussing and verbal argument between the pirates and Diet Coke. Fat Tinkerbell found it so funny that Weed Guy kept calm throughout the entire ordeal. When one of the pirates chose to threaten Weed Guy and warn Weed Guy that he'll begin a fight, that's when Fat Tinkerbell had the brilliant idea to begin recording the entire incident. Fat Tinkerbell quietly began recording with her own phone the interactions between Diet Coke versus pirates. It was the most hilarious video Fat Tinkerbell has ever recorded. Regardless, the pirates realized that she's recording and they left the property by the end of the situation and arguments. Fat Tinkerbell at the moment chose not to share the video with absolutely anyone. She just wanted to keep the video for her own entertainment. Well, as the days pass on, the king is trying to find a brand new shiny prince and a brand new shiny captain. Nothing much had changed throughout the days. Sometimes Fat Tinkerbell would get more and more info out of both the Weed Guy and Diet Coke on RoboCop. But nothing too good or out of the ordinary. For example, one day Fat Tinkerbell kept questioning Diet Coke about why RoboCop would have gotten her into trouble for talking to Pretty Boy, and Diet Coke says, "Maybe he was angry that you weren't talking to him like that." Ha 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 ha. Tee-hee. Diet Coke laughs, and so does Fat Tinkerbell. Fat Tinkerbell obviously enjoyed what Diet Coke was saying, but it was far from the truth. Possibly. As Fat Tinkerbell tries hard to get more and more info on RoboCop while also trying to act like she hates him, Fat Tinkerbell figured out a way to get attention from RoboCop. It had been several weeks since the filming thing, the camera girl situation with the pirates. Fat Tinkerbell thought of sharing that video with none other than RoboCop himself, but without getting herself into trouble or being fired or getting attention from the king of all people. Or the wrong people, in other words. She had no idea how to share it to RoboCop. After a while, or a week of thinking and trying to figure it out, she decided to slowly share it. First, she physically showed the video to Weed Guy, who kinda laughed at it and advised Fat Tinkerbell from sharing it with anyone. Then Fat Tinkerbell agreed not to share it with anyone. She actually felt bad about trying to, or wanting to send it to RoboCop even though she truly wanted to. She then went and physically showed the video to Diet Coke, who also laughed at it. Although Diet Coke didn't say much about it. Weed Guy and Diet Coke were the two main characters of that clip. Fat Tinkerbell was just laughing in the background. A week goes by and Fat Tinkerbell was put in a situation where she really wanted that attention from RoboCop. Apparently she wanted to show RoboCop how fun and interesting and quirky she is. By getting the video to RoboCop, she hoped to show him the fun part of her, the clown part of her, the humorous part of her, the exciting part of her. She somehow wanted to get that video to him. Without getting in trouble, without getting caught, without bringing everyone's attention, without Weed Guy and Diet Coke being involved. Without the king being involved. Without RoboCop finding out her true feelings for him. But also having RoboCop know that it's her, who recorded the video, who shot the clip. However, it was almost impossible. It's impossible to do all that exactly as she wanted it. RoboCop wasn't her best friend, for her to go on and show him the clip just like that. In fact, she didn't work alongside him or anything. She was now completely removed from the show. Fat Tinkerbell then thought of a way to get the video to RoboCop for sure. It was 100% risky and was gonna get everyone in trouble and involved. But it also was not gonna get Fat Tinkerbell or anyone in any real trouble in the end. Fat Tinkerbell was gonna play real stupid by the end of it. So, insert smiling devil face here. Yes, Fat Tinkerbell was about to get that video out to everyone in a specific manner. And RoboCop was gonna get to view it and know it was her. Basically, the plan involved another co-worker Fat Tinkerbell could care less about. This co-worker was Bear Boy. This co-worker, this little soldier who was an employee like Fat Tinkerbell. He, alone, got himself into a lot of trouble all by himself. He would go out of his way to flirt with everyone around the maze. He would hide at work and buy items inside the maze. Eat inside the soldier's vehicle and break and damage equipment and other things along those lines. He was known to be a gossip boy and was known to know everything about almost everyone. Any information you wanted about someone, Bear Boy would have it. Fat Tinkerbell did also go to Bear Boy for clues on RoboCop, and boy, she got that info. But moving on. Fat Tinkerbell went to factories with Bear Boy and she was willing to use him and involve him. He was a great character to get that video out without getting herself into trouble all by herself. In the end of all this, Fat Tinkerbell was gonna play the victim card, the stupid card, and play dumb. Be in defense of herself, Weed Guy, and Diet Coke. So yes, soon Fat Tinkerbell messaged Bear Boy, warning him not to show the video to anyone, and that he can only show his closest friends. And bam! Fat Tinkerbell sends the clip to Bear Boy over text. Fat Tinkerbell crossed her fingers and hoped for the best. Ha 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 ha. She knew deep down what this action entailed. It meant Weed Guy responding with complete anger towards Fat Tinkerbell for clicking that send button. Even Diet Coke reacting with anger. It meant that King might actually fire her from the job. It entailed that she could receive a write-up from the King as well and further ruin her reputation in that job. It meant someone could even sue her. Truly, Fat Tinkerbell was in for a whole deal of trouble. Fat Tinkerbell at that point was willing to accept whatever came her way. She was beyond bored and wanted that sweet RoboCop attention one way or another, even if it meant getting others involved and getting fired. Although, let's be real. In a job where one has met the hottest man on earth and is beyond attracted to that person. Yeah, nobody really wants to leave or quit or be fired from that job. Fat Tinkerbell was truly worried and fearful of being fired. She was making more money than ever, and she had her sweet eye candy at that place. Both the King and RoboCop were the eye candy. The King looked like Ryan Reynolds, almost exactly like Ryan Reynolds. That one handsome guy from the movie The Proposal and Green Lantern. RoboCop, on the other hand, was the Latin American copy of Brad Pitt from the movie Troy 2004. Or John Travolta from the movie Grease 1978. Those are the exact descriptions of these two men. The only difference is that RoboCop was shorter than King. By a couple inches. They were both like celebrities. Except, RoboCop definitely had more manhood, more testosterone, a super deep thunderous voice. And like mentioned in other stories, the King loved RoboCop as his little manager. As his little supervisor soldier and protected him at all costs. Moving forward. As weeks move on, Fat Tinkerbell thought that Bear Boy, the biggest gossip boy of them all, the biggest tattletale of them all, the biggest snitch of them all, would have already sent out the video to everyone. But no. It seemed as though Bear Boy truly kept his mouth shut this time, of all times. That he kept his word of not spreading the video. That he just had the video to keep to himself. And that was that. Fat Tinkerbell felt stupid for having shared it to such a useless tattletale, but at the same time she felt glad. At this point in time, Fat Tinkerbell gave up trying to get that amazing attention from RoboCop, and she decided to ignore the entire video recording plan that she made up in her head. She continued to focus on her weight loss and goals outside of the workplace. She started going to the gym almost every day and walk as much as she could while patrolling the maze at work as she was required to. The month of August 2019 arrived. Fat Tinkerbell had forgotten the entire video recording nonsense. She had met new employees and witnessed other employees quit. However, the main ones were all still there. Thankfully, Harry Potter was already a thing of the past. Weed Guy had told Fat Tinkerbell about how RoboCop wasn't Harry Potter's bestie like she thought previously, and that he just along with him to not be on his bad side. That Fat Tinkerbell doesn't really know if Harry Potter had written RoboCop up as well in the past, as a way of hinting to the fact that not everything is as Fat Tinkerbell thinks. And for Fat Tink to keep an open mind, as she's never heard both sides of the story. To understand that maybe RoboCop 2 has gotten into big trouble in the past. Weed Guy and Fat Tinkerbell became closer and closer friends. Even though Fat Tinkerbell was using Weed Guy as a source of information on RoboCop, Fat Tinkerbell also kind of grew closer to Weed Guy. When working under Weed Guy, he allowed Fat Tinkerbell to do just about anything she wanted as long as she did her job. One day, Fat Tinkerbell casually comes into work. She had no drama or anything happening to her. She steps into the office and the king himself was in there. Other employees wanted to enter the tiny office to clock into work as well. To punch into work. Suddenly and out of nowhere, the king stops any employee from entering and tells them all to wait outside. He then immediately tells Fat Tinkerbell to her face, "I need to speak with you." RoboCop wasn't there, as it was his day off, thankfully. The Weed Guy, however, was in there, as well as Boss Battle, the old Indian guy who had a thing for Fat Tinkerbell. Basically the king and two other supervisors. Fat Tinkerbell, already having forgot about the video recording nonsense, had no idea what it was about. And she imagined they just wanted her witness statement on something. Just anything else that wasn't about her being in trouble. However, the king begins his speech, now that they were all locked in there. What he says next was this. "Do you know anything about a video that is going around?" At first Fat Tinkerbell was confused. The king then says, "I have employees saying that you recorded a video and sent it to them." Fat Tinkerbell was absolutely just beyond embarrassed at that very moment. She stayed quiet and began remembering the video and the pirates and her sending it to Bear Boy and everything she had once planned. Immediately, King continues with, "Did you record it?" And Fat Tinkerbell, ever so speechless and in the middle of the silence while looking straight at the king, says, "Yes." The king then becomes angered and says, "Why would you do that? Were you trying to get someone in trouble? I have employees sending that video to each other. How reckless." Fat Tinkerbell, then remembering her plan to be in defense and play the idiot card, plus the victim card, began her statement, her version of the story. She tells the king that basically the pirates had begun threatening to cause harm upon Weed Guy. That she simply had decided to record in case things became violent. Fat Tinkerbell, as embarrassed as she was, felt as though she was about to cry out of guilt and shame, whilst trying to tell her version of the situation. The king, as aggravated as he was, he replied, "I watched the clip, you were laughing and recording as Diet Coke was there insulting and yelling at the pirates." Immediately, the Weed Guy jumped into Fat Tinkerbell's defense. Surprisingly, Weed Guy said, "The situation was far worse than presented in the clip, those guys were actually threatening us." The king then says, to both Fat Tinkerbell and Weed Guy, that this video could have gotten Weed Guy into serious trouble, Fat Tinkerbell into serious trouble, and mainly Diet Coke into serious trouble because she was the one harassing and tempting the pirates to attack them in the video. Fat Tinkerbell then apologized. She explained that she didn't know better, that she reacted out of fear. The king, in his angered state, then says that it was such a stupid thing to do, and he repeated it various times inside the office. Fat Tinkerbell and Weed Guy stayed quiet. Fat Tinkerbell obviously felt offended, but she knew that he was right. The king then begins to calm down as he says to Fat Tinkerbell, "You need to be careful who you talk to. You need to be careful who you make friends with because some people out here are trying to throw you under the bus." Fat Tinkerbell immediately realized that he was referring to Bear Boy, the only person she had shared the clip with, via text. Soon, the king left to his house all angered. Boss Battle was present for the entire discussion, but he was just there as a witness. Weed Guy then says to Fat Tinkerbell that all she has to do now is to sign the write-up that the king printed out for her. Fat Tinkerbell never before felt so uncomfortable. Ha 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 ha. Just kidding, she never felt such a thrill in her life before. This one, at the very least, was intentional. In the end, nobody lost their job. Fat Tinkerbell could care less about the weed guy and Diet Coke. Weed guy used to talk smack about her in secrecy with RoboCop, and Diet Coke out of nowhere stopped her friendship with her. It could be said that it was revenge, in some way or another. But no, they were just people she involved to get a video to RoboCop. She had a motive and a plan from the start. Fat Tinkerbell felt so happy that maybe now, this meant that the video has now been viewed by RoboCop. If Weed Guy viewed it, and the King viewed it, and Boss Battle viewed it, that obviously means that just about everyone viewed it, and that basically, overall means that RoboCop viewed the video. Hooray! RoboCop, after all, is a main supervisor. At the end of the day, he is in fact a main supervisor, and a popular guy with everyone. Those supervisors had to tell each other the news and updates all day every day. He's connected to the realm of Supervisors Club. Fat Tinkerbell knows that all the supervisors had their meetings and secret clubs for only the elite. That no employee was allowed to be involved, and were at a need-to-know basis. So yes, it must have been something that has blown up in the supervisor's realm or reached the elite supervisor club. For sure, the video reached RoboCop, 100%. The next few days were worrying for Fat Tinkerbell. Just because she's now painted as a bad employee in King's eyes. She felt completely ashamed when in his presence. She felt ashamed in Weed Guy's presence, and she felt ashamed with Boss Battle even. Nothing felt as normal and as comfortable prior to the video release. However, since this was a plan she had prepared, she had to accept it with everything that it carried. When she was an insignificant piece of nothingness, an obese short girl. Things at the very least felt normal and boring and comfortable. But now, she felt like an obese short girl who is reckless and a snitch. Like a weird, annoying, gossip girl, and everyone knew about it. She caused such an issue by getting filmed by Green-Eyed Snake. And now, she was again an issue by doing the recording herself. Regardless, she came in one afternoon to work and tried to forget it all. This time RoboCop was there. Weed Guy was sat on the supervisor computer writing down the list of BS tasks for his afternoon team. RoboCop, his twin bro and the Brad Pitt hottie that he is, was stood right next to Weed Guy, also facing the computer. It seemed as if RoboCop was just looking at the computer that Weed Guy was doing his business on. All the random employees began entering after Fat Tinkerbell. Fat Tinkerbell usually immediately sat down on that one chair near the door. That was her chair more often than not. She didn't like to be crowded by all the old male soldiers and employees. That chair by the door was her safe space. Ha 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 ha. Immediately, as Fat Tinkerbell was sat there all ashamed thinking about her actions of the recording and whatever else, she felt RoboCop's gaze piercing her presence. RoboCop had the most piercing gaze of anyone at all. He had tiny eyes, but his eyes were dark enough and squinty enough for you to notice and feel. RoboCop had deep-set hunter eyes. You could just feel those things looking through your soul. At this very moment, Fat Tink truly preferred for RoboCop to wear his shades. At least when he wore his shades, his puny eyes wouldn't pierce through your soul. Fat Tinkerbell could see it with her peripheral view. Obviously, she wasn't gonna look back at RoboCop for no reason at all and unprovoked. We all know RoboCop makes her feel all nervous and completely insecure. It would have been funny though, if Fat Tinkerbell did look back at him and said, "You like what you see?" Ha 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 ha. Tee-hee, tee-hee, tee-hee. As all the little soldiers were all entering and switching equipment with each other and talking about everything there is to talk about, RoboCop wouldn't even turn to look at anyone else. He made it clear that his attention was on Fat Tinkerbell for the remainder of those 10 to 15 minutes. Fat Tinkerbell was secretly loving it. Tee-hee. Fat Tinkerbell was just sat there, pretending to be upset and looking down at her phone as a distraction and escape. Soon enough, however, one of the random female soldiers gets very close to Fat Tinkerbell. She happened to be one of the few female soldiers of the maze besides Fat Tinkerbell and Diet Coke at the time. She was a young attractive woman of color, and we'll just call her Ms. Boots because she's practically irrelevant and for the sake of the story. So Ms. Boots gets very close to Fat Tinkerbell in that very moment, as everyone was clocking out and clocking in. Fat Tinkerbell looked up at her, and she says, "What happened that day when the king locked you inside the office? What's going on?" She said with a smirk. Fat Tinkerbell answers, "You mean when the king didn't let you into the office?" RoboCop's hunter eyes still piercing both of them as they whispered. Immediately after, as Fat Tinkerbell was whispering with Ms. Boots, Fat Tinkerbell noticed, with her peripheral view, that RoboCop had gotten down to the floor. She then heard a loud, full-on laugh coming from RoboCop. RoboCop's body was still at the desk next to Weed Guy. She noticed that his hands were pressed on top of the desk, and RoboCop had hidden and dug his face on his forearms as he was hiding behind the desk laughing at the top of his lungs. Fat Tinkerbell immediately acknowledged that RoboCop was laughing at her. Immediately, she acknowledged that he was aware of the video. Immediately, she understood that he was trying to prove his point. Weed Guy had no reaction. As much as RoboCop did his little weird behaviors right next to him, Weed Guy could care less. It was honestly funny to witness this. Fat Tinkerbell didn't let him get away with any laughing or mocking towards her, because she had not looked in his direction, not once. To the blind eye, it was unknown as to what RoboCop was laughing at. But deep down, deep down, RoboCop knows what he's laughing about, Weed Guy knows what he's laughing about, Diet Coke knows what he's laughing about, and more than anything, Fat Tinkerbell knows what he's laughing about. Ha 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 ha. Fat Tinkerbell tried her hardest to pretend nothing bothers her and to have a straight face through the entire scene. She really tried to pretend she doesn't know or doesn't care. Regardless, deep down, that's exactly what she wanted. The plan to be in RoboCop's mind or get attention from him somehow was absolutely 100% working. Wink wink. Tee-hee. Again. She had created this plan because she was no longer working under him. She was removed from his shift. So finally, she created a plan that actually worked. Just having RoboCop laugh at her, whilst hiding his face and behaving like that next to Weed Guy, was enough for Fat Tinkerbell. Knowing that she made him laugh was enough for her. The plan had done its job. At the very least, and at the end of it, Fat Tinkerbell made RoboCop laugh. She had somehow taken the risk to be in the spotlight for RoboCop once again, and this time it worked. Regardless, Fat Tinkerbell was still stuck under Weed Guy, who's not only a nerd, but he's no fun like RoboCop. So Fat Tinkerbell still had it in her plan to lose all the weight, to win over RoboCop or at least get him into bed with her. And soon enough she had lost almost 8 pounds in a week. End of story. If you wish to view the real clip, where Diet Coke is arguing with the pirates, refer to the written version of this story placed on the description here. These are true stories that happened in real life. Well guys, that was the real life, true story experienced by the author of The Camera Girl. If you haven't read the previous stories, I suggest you do so in order to understand the characters and the storyline. Share this story with whoever needs it. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you've experienced something like this, please leave your comments down below. If you've ever crushed on your boss or your own bully, just leave your thoughts on this whole situation down below in the comments. You can find me on BitChute under the same username. You can find me in Rumble under my very username. You can also find me in DeviantArt under the same username. My second YouTube is EmyyWolf Productions. All other links down in the description. Thanks for watching.